China's one-child policy from 1980 to 2016 limited most married couples to only one child, and in the Chinese culture, children are seen as an investment. Women join their husband's family, and the husband and his wife take care of his elders. This left most families hoping for males, leaving them pressured, if not forced, to give up their daughters, many of which have been scattered all over the world, with a large majority in the US. Most of the adoptive parents have a limited knowledge of the Chinese culture and the lack of having an Asian American experience, leaving the children to navigate their culture and race without that specific role model. Do you feel like the fact that you were adopted is or was a secret from your friends, from you when you were younger, etc.?
It was never really a secret. I always knew, because, it's kind of obvious, because I look a lot different from the rest of my family. And whenever my friends would ask me, they would always say, like, where are you from? And I'd say, oh, I'm from China. And they never really thought it was weird. They were always like, oh, that's so cool.
Like, understanding how you should react. I think it's kind of obvious if someone, I think it could be obvious that somebody tells you that not to, elicit pity. It's more so just kind of, telling you where they're from, or, saying, your name. It's just kind of a fact. At least how, for me, it was always just, a fact about me. It was never something I, felt bad about, or, wanted other people to feel bad about at all. It honestly made me, make me more uncomfortable when people would say, oh, I'm sorry, or, oh, or, just, oh. Because that made me not really know how to address it.
Have you ever felt like being adopted was looked at with pity, shame, privilege, etc.?
Absolutely, yes. Growing up, really well-intentioned people would tell me all the time that I should be grateful for being adopted because I have this great life compared to the life I could have had back in China. It was getting to the point, and sometimes still does, to the point where I feel guilty for having adverse feelings or feelings of shame or sadness, or any normal child-parent relationship where you're upset with your mom. It's totally normal, but being adopted kind of adds that layer of, can I actually be upset with this person who gave me this new life?
Your parents included your culture in your upbringing. Do you wish you had more of a connection to it?
We celebrate Chinese New Year every year, and we go to Asian markets. And they used to take me to a Chinese school to learn Chinese language, and I hated it. It was boring, and I never got it, because I was the only one who really didn't know any of it, because all the other students kind of knew Chinese.
I do feel a teeny little bit like I kind of missed out on the really cool culture of China. I do kind of wish at some point I had gotten to experience it, or get to at some point in my life.
And I met a girl who was doing Chinese dance, and so I got introduced to her group, Atlanta Chinese Dance Company, or ACDC. I was able to learn traditional classic and contemporary Chinese dance through them, which was really awesome. And then I actually studied abroad in China in 2018, my junior year of college. And so I got to live abroad for 5 months, which was a super interesting experience, being there. Kind of knowing the language to an extent, not being fluent, obviously not sounding like a native speaker.
Since being at college, I also feel like I've also embraced being able to celebrate being Asian, and I realized I don't really need an excuse to have an interest in my culture. So I think college was a really big turning point for me when I had that exposure to a larger Asian community, recognizing that I am a part of that community, but that doesn't mean that I have to relate to every single thing and every person within it.
Any thoughts on stereotypes, adopted or Chinese?
I was bullied once because of a username that had China in it. Because of the pandemic that was happening, they'd say it was all my fault for starting it.
Sometimes I feel like it makes me feel wrong about reaffirming these stereotypes of if I am a straight A student or I'm getting good grades in math or science, it's people are going to view that as because of who I am, rather than that it was just my work ethic and what I've done.
In groups with a low Asian population, do you ever feel like you don't fit in because of your race?
And my dance company that I was in, it was on my hand I could count 3 Asian girls. For the costumes that we would have nude things to hold up the top, they were all very pale, and it didn't really clicked to me until I saw in pictures. I was like, oh, I probably should have pancaked those or matched my skin tone better. Pancaking point shoes to match my skin tone or things like that. It took someone in the company who was Latino to tell me how to do things, and she helped to guide me with those things.
There was this one other girl in my dance class. She was Taiwanese, and her makeup always looked so good. At a certain point, like maybe around 9 or 10, when I started to realize, like, why doesn't my makeup look as good as like this girl's who has similar features? I would look at like YouTube videos of like beauty influencers, and there was one who I like still follow to this day. Her name's like Jen from Head to Toe, and she had all these like videos about like how to do your eye makeup when you don't have a crease. This other dancer in my group, her mom would often come over to my mom and she'd be like, no, like Bridget needs a thin comb for her hair. And my mom was like, she wasn't offended at all. I think she took it with like, oh, like, thank you so much for telling me, and like, okay, like she just followed her instructions because no one had told her otherwise. There wasn't anyone else to tell her.
Have you ever done any DNA testing? If so, or if you want to, what are you hoping to find?
I'm hoping to find if I have any siblings or where my parents might be.
When I was growing up again, I didn't really want to. I felt honestly, I didn't want to either embarrass or offend my parents. Medical history, and I think that would be a reason that I would want to do any sort of testing. Going to the doctor's office and actually being able to give them a little bit more.
So I have done 23andMe, and honestly it wasn't like, personally it wasn't my idea. I had no intention of using it to like track my biological parents or anything like that. Nothing there was like something I couldn't have told you before. Like I was like 98% Chinese, like that's not shocking. In the end, it's just like comparing you to other people who've done these tests and seeing what genes or like DNA you have in common. Did it just more for fun. But it was interesting to see like what regions, or like to see like, to confirm I guess that I was like almost 100% Chinese. I guess maybe there is some like ambiguity there when you're adopted for sure.
I've done 23andMe, but honestly not much has come out of it, because I think since 23andMe is based in the West, there's not a lot of access in China or in other surrounding Asian countries, and China's pretty heavily locked down with DNA and sharing it with the West. I was more doing it for the health and genetic information that it'd give you, because I even went to the doctor last week and they're like, do you have any family history? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm genetically predisposed for.
Given the time of your adoption, do you feel like the one-child policy affected you specifically? Do you feel better knowing your parents may have had to give you up because of the policy?
I think it did, because during the time it would still have happened and been in law, but it would like be dying off by then. But I think it would be good to think about that. It was because of the law that they would be able to take care of me and that they're in a good state.
I know that I'm impacted by the one-child policy. It's really hard to find an adopted Chinese male, and I can count way more. I mean, not a ton, but I know a lot more adopted Chinese females. And I don't know if it makes me feel better or not that the government has done it, because I don't know my situation. I don't know if I was the second child in the family, or what if I was the first and they were waiting for a male, so they decided to give me up because I wasn't a male. And honestly, China is now facing a crisis of a lack of females this age.